and welcome to Archive Dive. I'm Maria Lockwood, a reporter with the Superior Telegram. Each month, we dip into files on historic events, people, and places in Superior and Douglas County with local historians. Today, we'll examine the children's homes of Superior. Their history traces back to the Pattison brothers. The city's most recognizable children's home is Fairlawn Mansion, built by Martin Pattison. Following Martin's death, his wife, Grace, gifted the mansion to the Children's Home and Refuge Association. It served as a children's home for 42 years. The family home of Martin's brother, William Pattison, was also used to care for orphans and would eventually grow into St. Joseph Children's Home. Helping us dive into the story today is local historian Teddy Moronic. Hello, Teddy.
Hi, Maria.
Thanks for joining us.
Oh, I'm glad to be back.
Wonderful. So, were there only two children's homes in Superior? Or are those the two most recognizable?
I mean, there were children's homes prior to St. Joseph's and then, the Superior Children's Home. Mm-hmm. But they just all finally morphed into those two entities. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The oldest one was, of course, the Superior Children's Home and Refuge Association, which was formed in about 1904. Wow. And the two officers whose names will probably be most recognizable to people. The president of the organization was Mrs. Robert Kelly, who Mr. Kelly was very instrumental in creating the parks in Superior. And his wife was also involved in a lot of civic matters. And her vice president was Grace Pattison.
Oh.
So Grace Pattison had an interest in the welfare of children, orphan children in Superior, since the beginning of the organization. The other orphanage or children's home, as they're called, came through the Catholic Church, where they were, worried about not only the children who were having trouble in their home life or who had lost their parents, not only in Superior, but through the entire Diocese of Superior, which encompassed about 16 or 17 counties in northern Wisconsin.
Wow.
Of course, Superior is the biggest city, mm-hmm. but they all supported St. Joseph's Children's Home in Superior.
So these children from throughout the area would come to
whoever
Superior.
whoever needed a place would be welcomed at St.
Mm-hmm.
Joseph's, even if you weren't Catholic.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
And where did they start out?
They started out in a place that was often referred to, at least I remember it being referred to as the smaller Fairlawn, or because it belonged to Martin Pattison's younger brother, William, and his family lived there. And I've always heard that it was built by William, and that's why it was not quite as ostentatious as Fairlawn, but it was sort of a smaller version of it. But doing some research not that many months ago for a friend of mine who had purchased something from the home when it was torn down, mm-hmm. I find out that it had been built by Theodore Smith.
Oh,
and then
not Mr. Pattison.
Not Mr. Pattison, and sold to him not that many years after it was built. But the Smiths are sort of everybody's connected in this town in these early days. Mm-hmm. The Smith family married into the Roth family, who owned Roth Department Store. Mm-hmm. So that's their connection there. But yeah, it was not built by William Pattison.
Where was it located, this smaller Fairlawn?
It's on, what's the address? It's in the 1400 block of East 2nd Street, and Fairlawn's between 9th and 10th.
So it was along the same stretch, a ways down the road.
Yeah, there were 3 really big houses along that stretch. One belonged to Martin Pattison, and mm-hmm. obviously William lived in that one. And then the other one was a Dr. Conan, who was a doctor in Superior, but he also had ties to Pattison because he invested in Martin's ventures into mining.
Oh, okay.
And so William was involved in that too. Mm-hmm. But that was Dr. Conan's house, and it eventually morphed into the home of the bishop of the Superior Diocese. Oh. So they all are sort of connected to one another. Mm-hmm. And the other thing they share is they were all designed by the same architect.
All 3, Fairlawn and the
Conans and
William Pattison.
Yeah, they were all designed by John DeWard. They're pretty sure now that he did design Fairlawn.
Okay.
They don't have any blueprints, mm-hmm. but they're pretty sure, and he did do the other 2 houses. So
okay, yeah. So it's interesting that 2 of those 3 houses ended up serving as children's homes.
Yeah, I know.
Which one? So the Superior Children's Home and Refuge Association is the early one, the Superior Children's Home.
The one that's in Fairlawn.
The one
that was in
moved to
Fairlawn. Yeah.
Where did that one start?
They started out in Billings Park on, I think it was 20th and Ohio out there.
Okay.
When this group was put together, the Superior Children's Home and Refuge Association got together, the first thing they did was look for a location because they knew there was a need for a place for children who, either were without family or their families could not take care of them at the moment. So these ladies got together within a month. Once the organization was put together, they'd found this place and turned it into a children's home, hired staff. They hired a matron, they hired a cook, they hired nursery aides, because they could, there were some rules in Wisconsin. Wisconsin hadn't really, I don't think, gotten big time into regulating these children's homes, but they could take kids almost from birth.
Oh, wow.
Until they were 16 years old. Mm-hmm. But then Wisconsin sort of clamped down on that and said the babies couldn't really, like newborns could not be, they had to be placed in a home. But they did take young children, so they had a nursery.
Okay.
And these ladies, they got together and they had to raise all the money themselves because there was no one to support them.
There was no government programs to help with this. There was no...
I think by the time they got to Fairlawn, like the county, I don't know if it was just the county or if the state kicked in some money, but it was like $9 a week for each child. And it was costing them at that time in the 50s like $20 a week. So they had to make up that difference. And they always had to do that because they were not privately funded.
How did they raise the money?
Oh, they did everything. Their big event every year was a charity ball.
Okay.
They started out holding them at the old Hotel Superior, and they ended up finally at the Elks Club, which is not the Elks Club we think of nowadays. It was on Ogden.
Okay.
And every year they would have a big Valentine's ball, or it would be around Christmas time or something, and people would pay to go. And that was the big event of the year. One time they put on, I believe it was an opera.
An opera?
At the Grand Opera House.
Okay.
Was some kind of, musical. And they charged $1 for a ticket, which was a pretty big price in those days.
We're talking early 1900s,
yes,
right?
That was they didn't really sell tickets for that much, even at the Opera House. And they got 1,000 people there.
Wow. But
they, when you think of it, they not only had to feed all those kids and clothe them, they also had to heat those places. So it was a lot of money to raise. I think like at St. Joseph's Children's Home, it was like $800 a month for coal in those days, which was a lot, the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, that was, and then the food. And the population of the homes varied probably from week to week.
Right.
They could get a family that was in crisis and get 5 kids overnight that they had to take care of, so...
Are there any records of how many children went through the 2 different children's homes?
Did I read something about Fairlawn where there are like 2,000 kids that had come? It might be more. I don't know. And of course, the Catholic Church would keep their records don't have to be made public. Yeah. So it was a lot. But the St. Joseph's Children's Home was built to house 200 children.
Just 200? That was a big building.
I know, but they also had a pharmacy. They had a little, like a couple beds in a hospital area, take care of kids that were sick. I mean, they had a lot going on in that place. It was a huge building.
When did they decide to make the move from William Pattison's house to build one of their own?
They decided when we got a new bishop in Superior.
Oh, okay. Which
He
bishop?
was really a go-getter. He was Bishop Kudelka.
Kudelka, okay.
Kudelka. He was an immigrant. He came to the United States when he was 14. He was from Bohemia, which is really the Czech Republic. And apparently he spoke, I saw several different references to how many languages he spoke, but he either spoke 7, 8, or 9 different languages.
Wow.
And he was an artist and a writer and a speaker. And he ordained Father Philip Gordon from Gordon, Wisconsin, was the first Ojibwe Catholic priest.
Correct.
And he was ordained by this bishop, but he raised all the money to build the orphanage, or the St. Joseph's Children's Home. They always referred to it as the orphanage back then, but he raised all the money, and The Children's Chapel itself, which I'm sure we will talk about, cost $42,000 to build it was completed in 1919, and he raised all that money himself by lecturing. And I don't know if he painted or if he did something like that. He did that on his own.
Okay, so the chapel was just a part of St. Joseph's. You also had the pharmacy, you had the
Yes, you had a
dormitory
root
for the
cellar.
children.
You had a root cellar. They had a big space in the basement where the kids could roller skate.
Really?
If the weather was bad, they could play down there. They had their own little farm, kind of. They raised pigs at one time. At one time, they had 2 ponies for the children. Businessmen in Superior,
Wow.
raised the money and bought 2 ponies for the kids. I don't know how that would go over, but they bought them saddles and everything. And because it's been gone so long, the building's been gone now 20 years, and it was vacant for so many years before that people understand just how lavish this whole setup was, because it was not only money spent on, of course, the building itself and the children's chapel, which was over the top, but the whole landscaping on the outside was, I even remember, I can even remember that because I went to school with the kids who lived at St. Joe's, and I remember going there. We couldn't go in the building, but we would play outside with them. And they had this huge fountain in the front, a statue of St. Anthony in the middle, and then it was surrounded by dolphins, statues of dolphins that had cherubs on their back. They had a grotto that was a replica of Lourdes in France.
Wow.
They had the Stations of the Cross, and then this was all outside. And then they had this very, very, very interesting building. It was a stone building, and on top of it was a replica of the Statue of Liberty. Yeah.
Okay.
But this was all in the ground, so I mean, no expense was spared.
Wonderful. And inside, you said the children's chapel. Wasn't there like great artists brought in to create paintings and statues?
Yeah, the bishop brought over workmen from both Italy and Czechoslovakia, and they lived here for 2 years. And they did the interior. They would build their own molds for the statues. And I have seen very few color photographs, but I ran across one that appeared in the Duluth News Tribune when they were tearing it down. And the photographer did an excellent job. He got this close-up of the ceiling, which you would not believe the detail of the little cherubs up there. And the work, it's unbelievable. And they made it for children because the pews were smaller.
Really?
And the communion rail was smaller to fit children.
Wow.
I know.
Such a work of art.
I know.
When did that open? When did children move from William Pattison's house to the completed St. Joe's?
I think they started St. Joe's in 15, and I think by 1917 they were moving in.
Okay.
And the chapel was finished in 19.
In 1919.
Yeah. So.
Do they know how many children went through St. Joe's?
No, there's an awfully good website. I think Catholic Charities is the one who maintains it. It's sort of a history of Catholic Charities, and they include the orphanage or St. Joe's in there. And there are a lot of great pictures there that I hadn't seen before.
Oh.
Kind of hard to find pictures, especially of the interior, because I do understand that, because it's like a home. So. But there's pictures of the grounds and things, but of course they're all black and white.
Right.
Yeah, and their history.
You had school friends who lived there. Did they have any thoughts on what the place was like, or did they ever talk about it?
I don't think we ever talked about it. All these years later, I wonder what happened to them, and I hope they're happy. There was this one girl that was in my grade, and I liked her so much. I wanted my mom and dad to adopt her so she could be my sister, but my mom, my mom understood that maybe she was just there temporarily and would go back to her home. So I hope everything turned out all right for her. I didn't know this at the time, but they also attended St. Francis too. So it was the 2 Catholic schools in East End that took in students from the home.
Okay. What happened to change? I mean, how long was Fairlawn a children's home, and how long was St. Joe's active as a children's home? What were the dates that we're talking about?
I think St. Joe's closed in 1963 as a children's home, and then it became a place for kids who had emotional problems.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they did that for years, but they closed in 1963, and then, of course, Fairlawn was done by 1962.
What had changed? Why were children's homes no longer needed, or was it just because they were getting old and could no longer have children in them?
Well, part of it was the population of the children's home was they were decreasing, and These were both two huge buildings. But the other thing was that Wisconsin, the state stepped in, and had rules now that they couldn't take in children of a certain age. They needed to be in a foster home, and they were really encouraging fostering for kids rather than putting them in these homes. So that was why they ended up closing. And it was getting harder and harder to maintain the buildings and to accommodate all the rules and regulations that were probably bypassed early on as far as safety and all these other things and handicap accessibility and all of that, So that was part of it. And then there were women, I think the board at the Superior Children's Home had like 24 members. They were all expected each year to volunteer 150 hours.
Wow.
Doing work for the home. If you were going to be on the board, that's what you were going to do.
So were they losing volunteers?
I don't know if they ever lost. It seemed like their volunteers were pretty devoted.
Okay.
But it was getting harder and harder for them to raise the amount of money that you needed to run these places too.
Those huge buildings,
Right.
Fairlawn, just huge.
And you had to pay, Fairlawn had to pay people, where if it was St. Joe's, they were run by the nuns usually. And of course, if they got any salary, it was very minimal because their room and board was paid for. So
now I read that Grace Pattison gifted the Fairlawn to the Superior Children's Home, but then she wanted it torn down afterwards.
Right. And nobody could ever understand why.
She didn't want it to be anything but a children's home.
That was it. And I don't know why. Maybe because she was so involved with the organization too in its beginnings. But if it wasn't for Toby Markovich, who was the city attorney at that time, who found a detail in her will about Fairlawn that changed the whole course of events, because the city did not want to lose that building. But, I look at it, I was talking to you about this earlier, people forget what Fairlawn looked like early on. In the 1960s, they forget what it looked like. It looked nothing like it does now. And I think I didn't really pay much attention to it because it was just this big old house, and it was kind of ugly because the tower had blown off in the 50s and they hadn't replaced it, and they had put on the siding. And so it was nothing special except it was big, but there were a lot of big houses in Superior, old houses, but the city knew they had something. And so Toby Markovich found this way out by deeding it back to the family, and then the family would sell it to the city.
Oh, so that's how Fairlawn was kept and not raised.
Right. And the family agreed with it because I'm certain, Grace was dead by then, and they had these memories and they wanted to keep them, and they didn't want to see it being torn down. So the city paid about $12,000 for it.
Wow.
Because when they had it assessed, the land was worth that much, but the house wasn't worth anything.
Well, it's come a long way.
I know. And then, of course, it had taken, had housed children for 42 years.
Right. Did it have any special accommodations for the children? I understand there might have been a swimming pool in the basement.
Well, that was left over from the Pattisons.
Or a bowling alley?
That was left over from the Pattisons.
So the Pattisons had all of that in the basement, and then that just transferred on to the children.
Right.
So they didn't...
I don't know if you could call it an actual swimming pool or if it was just like a wading or a lap pool or something like that, because the youngest Pattison daughter had rheumatoid arthritis. It is why Grace moved out to California, because of the weather.
Okay.
So
I always thought those had been put in for the children's home, but they had not.
No. I guess the kids were very respectful, of course, the house, and what it looked like in the interior. But still, things had to be changed. And I read the story about how, was it the formal parlor or something? They decided to paint the walls like white. You cover everything. And then the ceiling yellow. And they put up some colonial wallpaper. So you can imagine when you look at Fairlawn now, and you see what's there, and they were covering that original stuff up.
With wallpaper.
They had to do it, because wear and tear. Kids, I can't imagine. I guess the kids were taught to be very respectful of the building, but they had to change everything. I mean, they had to have dormitories and, all of that stuff on the top floors. And
I remember they had a reunion since I've been working for the Telegram, which we won't even talk about how long that was, but a while back, they had a reunion where children who had been residents at Fairlawn came back. And I was touched by the fact that while they appreciated the fact that they had a home there, it wasn't really a home.
I know. It's really sad. That's why I often wonder about the kids I went to school with. Like, I hope your life turned out okay, because I was so lucky. I came from a stable home. Yeah.
And there were a lot of reasons why children ended up there, right? It wasn't just orphans.
No, it wasn't orphans, families who couldn't take care of them anymore. Either a parent had died or left, or there were alcohol problems or whatever, It was a refuge society, wasn't it? Maybe you just needed it for a couple months, a year, and then you could go back home. But those ladies are amazing. Those ladies are absolutely amazing. St. Joe's used to do a tag day every year.
Tag day.
These ladies would just blanket the town and they would ask for donations. So it was sort of like the poppy.
Right, the American Legion poppy that you are given and then you can give a donation.
Yeah, so they did that. They did one day a year, and that they used that money to pay for coal to heat St. Joseph's during the winter.
Right.
And I'm proud to say my grandmother, their last tag sale, my grandmother was a captain.
Was she?
Yes. So
how many tags did she
I don't
sell?
know. I'm sure she probably strong-armed a lot of people.
Probably.
And then they had little replicas of cradles made, and they put them in all the businesses so people could donate money to St. Joe's.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But they just, depended on these people. It was, you had to depend on a group of people to support you. Although eventually, I think both St. Joseph's and the Superior Children's Home benefited from what they called the community chest at that time. I think was the precursor to maybe United Way.
Okay.
Where they would take over a lot of the fundraising and they spread their, whatever they got in donations among different organizations in Superior.
In the area. Right.
So they benefited, but still wasn't enough.
Now, Fairlawn had a happy ending. The building is still there. It's beautiful. People tour it. St. Joseph did not have a happy ending. Can you tell us how that happened?
Oh, well, it was used for many years by the diocese. And
After
then,
children, so the children's home stopped in the 60s? 63,
yes,
you
63.
said. And then it helped children who had mental
and emotional problems. And they did that
problems.
for many years, I think till 74 or something.
Okay.
And then it sat empty for a while. Finally, somebody bought it, but they didn't take care of it. So it was empty. And of course, it was, falling apart. There was an order of nuns from the state of Washington who came and bought many of the things that were in the children's chapel and took them back and put them, I think it was in a Catholic girls' high school in Washington.
Okay.
It would be almost impossible to save a building like that, the cost alone, and it was filled with asbestos for one thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there were always problems, but there was a fight to save the children's chapel, but, unless you could have removed it in one piece, you couldn't have saved, because it was on one of the top floors, too. I think it was on the
How many stories?
It was 3.
3 stories.
It's a huge building.
Do you know when it went down?
Was it 2003?
It could have been. I was working at the Telegram by the time. I remember it going down, but I don't remember the date. I didn't look it up.
Yeah. They gave tours for many years. There's an organization in Superior that did that, hoping that would spur interest in it.
Right.
But, I thought I went online and I was trying to find out a little bit more about the apartments that are out there now, which I really like. They're huge, but that sort of mimics the size of the children's home. But they are called Arcadia. And their name comes from the place where they got the stone for the foundation in Fairlawn.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And they
it
thought
comes
that
full
would,
circle.
they thought that would be sort of, a tie-in to the history of Superior by naming it after, I don't know what Fairlawn's foundation must be made of, sandstone or something like that they had gotten it from Douglas County, and it was the Arcadia mine. So they named it after that. I really like that idea.
That is neat. And it's interesting. So if folks are driving by and they see that, that's about how big St. Joe's was.
It was a huge building, yes.
Wow.
And the grounds and everything. And when it closed down, one of the ideas when it first closed down was that they were going to turn it into a Catholic high school for East End, although they already had one Catholic high school in Superior Cathedral.
Right.
But that was one of the ideas. And I thought, there's not that many people in East End. to fill that whole building. I don't know. But they were just trying to find something to do with it.
And they just couldn't.
Yeah, except, Catholic Charities, or I don't know if it was Catholic Charities that moved in at first. They had the space for the emotionally disabled children. But yeah, it's a big building.
Oh, it's too bad that it's gone. But I'm glad that Fairlawn was saved.
I am too.
And that the memories are still there for folks.
And it looks so beautiful.
It does. So good on the city. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Teddy. And thank you for listening to Archive Dive. New episodes are available monthly at superiortelegram.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have a topic you'd like us to explore, email me at mlockwood@superiortelegram.com.